Maharani for saving me this morning.
Oh no.
She found me walking off the farm. I took the wrong fork.
I don't know what to think. I said, are you leaving us?
I wasn't. That's the problem. I wasn't thinking. I was just, just
Who's
pacing.
that way? Instead of coming this way, he just was walking really fast. Go ahead.
And she also found me yesterday walking way down. Remember you?
Yeah.
I take a japa walk every day, about 4 or 5.
In the morning or
No. In the afternoon. Finished my rounds. And I was walking down Anner, where the fork is, and then you go down. What's that?
Huh?
Peak that way?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
left.
going towards.
Preacher Pal,
Yeah.
My Guru Maharaj, it's Preacher Pal. My Guru Maharaj one time he said, we should have him rename it Preacher Prabhupada. I don't think they would go for it at this point in time.
Someday.
Someday.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Whoops. Here we are. Is this all right? No, this is kind of low. Is this all right? It's just not much amplification. Just a little more, maybe.
Good.
Wake me up.
Preacher Pal did go there.
I walked down Preacher Pond. There's a lot of dogs down there, so I don't do that anymore.
Just need your stick.
Yeah, that's why I took a stick yesterday. Okay, this is the final lesson of the Abhidheya section, which means we're committing ourselves more to Prabhupada's mission. Lesson 7, finding our mission in his mission. It's kind of like, what am I going to be when I grow up in Krishna consciousness? Now, if I don't know by the age of 72, I probably will never know. So, better late than never, right? At the end of the last lesson, we took a look at the unfulfilled phase of our founder Acharya's mission, the demonstration of a spiritually classless society through development of Daiva Varnashram communities, living the way Krishna lives in a natural village setting. Such communities would offer us and the world a practical vision of how Krishna culture works on earth. The Lord's positive alternative to the suffering and impersonalism imposed by our misdirected modern civilization. Yet, since many of us were born and raised in Kali cities and suburbs, we may find ourselves neither ready, willing, nor able to follow Srila Prabhupada into the Varnashram frontier. And we may wonder what our place is in our founder Acharya's greater mission to re-spiritualize humanity. In this lesson, we'll take a look at how to find our natural place in our founder Acharya's worldwide movement with the help of senior devotees thoroughly grounded in Srila Prabhupada's life, teachings, mood, and mission. Srila Prabhupada, deep in meditation at Bhaktivedanta Manor, summer 1973. Finding our mission in his mission is largely about finding guides who can help us make our best contribution to Srila Prabhupada's Hare Krishna movement. This lesson has undergone many incarnations. I think I'm finally happy with the way this is. So, anyway. All right, Astika Prabhu.
Importance of doing our own duty.
Okay. This is so important that there's 2 verses in the Gita which have the same first 2 half lines. That only happens one other time. Manmana Bhava Bhakto, which is 934 and 1865. Yeah. And it happens, there's another pair of verses, which, and that's the other pair was about thinking of Krishna. You can understand that, how that would be emphasized, repeated. But here's another pair, but I'm just going to give you, we're going to do both. Okay. So, Astika, want to read?
By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done.
So just see, I already forgot how I changed this beginning. I used to open up with a pair of verses about duty, but now I just cut to the chase, where after itemizing all the duties of the different varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, then Krishna says this: by following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Wow, that's great. Just be yourself, right? Now, please hear from me how this can be done. Next verse, famous verse.
By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work.
Just be yourself, but for Krishna. In the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, after summarizing the qualities and work of different types of human beings, Lord Krishna describes how everyone can become perfect. In every age, we are born ignorant, but especially in the Kali age, we often have difficulty knowing who we are and what our duty is. Alright? So, in the left image, a disciple sadly hands Socrates the hemlock the Athenian court has ordered him to drink for preaching heresy. Here you have to see the two. Is it two? Yeah. So there's two quotes I kind of just fused together there. Famous quotes from Socrates. Socrates was the only Western philosopher Prabhupada liked. So we're going to remind ourselves why here. Know thyself. The unexamined life is not worth living. Above the image are two of Socrates' most famous statements about self-realization. Know thyself, and the unexamined life is not worth living. When his old friend Crito, who was by his bedside there with his hand on Socrates' knee or something like that, his famous painting, The Death of Socrates. When his old friend Crito asks, and we know this because someone was there and took notes, and they survived. So we have a very detailed report of the death of Socrates. Crito asks, how should we bury you? Socrates replies, however you want to. If you can actually catch me, and I don't escape you. In other words, I'm not the body. You may do what you like with this body, but I'm long gone. Srila Prabhupada praised Socrates for realizing he wasn't his body. So that was, circa 400 BC? So you fast forward almost 2,000 years, 1,900 years. Nearly 2,000 years later in Hamlet, Shakespeare has his character Polonius speak the now famous line, "This, above all, to thine own self be true." But Polonius' self-conception is more one of worldly self-interest, a distinct downgrade from Socrates' spiritual conception. Yeah, if you know Hamlet, Polonius was advising his son Laertes, "To thine own self be true," but it was a worldly, watch out for watch your back, nobody else is going to watch your back, you've got to look out for yourself. But that wasn't the kind of self-conception Socrates had. His self-conception was Atma, spirit. Atma, Prabhupada tells us, can refer to spirit, or mind, or, let me see what I do. Or body, actually. But Polonius' self-conception is more one of worldly self-interest, a distinct downgrade from Socrates' spiritual conception, and the dominant self-concept today, typified by the American magazine Self. Do they have Self in the Southeast? You ever seen Self in the checkout lines?
I've seen it, but not recently.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I haven't seen it recently. But what do you think is on the cover of Self?
A beautiful lady.
Beautiful lady or a beautiful man or both. It's totally grounding everybody in the bodily concept of life. Promoting absolute absorption in the gross material body. Okay, now here's a question. Basti?
In Kali Yuga, why is it so difficult to know who we are and what our duty is?
Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next slide, and we're going to hear Prabhupada addressing the World Health Organization in 1974 in Geneva, and he's going to talk about Varna Samkara. So, which, guess who that is? That's us, basically. It can either mean unwanted population or it can mean mixed caste. So, in other words, mixed up. Here we go.
The Vedic civilization is Varnashram Dharma. If the Varnashram Dharma is not properly protected, then there will be population who are called Varnashram, mixed population.
People will not marry properly, and people, even when they marry, will not necessarily have Garbhadan Samskar. As John Lennon once said, this is funny, John always thought it was funny that the press would ask him about the state of the world affairs. Because the Beatles were so popular, they thought they'd ask them anything about anything. So, why do you think the world's such a mess, John? Something like that. The reporter asked. And John said, well, most people are born out of a bottle of beer on Saturday night, He got it. That's true. When people just come together willy-nilly. And so that's a recipe for, importing all kinds of weird folks from the lower regions. And we see that more and more today. So, how does Prabhupada, what he said, answer the question, in Kali Yuga, why is it so difficult to know who we are and what our duty is? Any educated guesses?
Because our mode is so mixed up.
Yeah, we're mixed. We're such a mixed bag of tricks. I mean, have you noticed in your own consciousness, nobody's purely anything. We have tendencies toward all kinds, our tendencies toward work are all over the map. So Prabhupada really nailed it there. Okay. Well, let's hear him say it again. Whoop.
The Vedic civilization is Varnashram Dharma. If the Varnashram Dharma is not properly protected, then there will be population who are called Varnashram, mixed population.
In Kali Yuga, we're all more or less Varna Samkara, mixed caste. In other words, all mixed up. Small wonder then that professions like life coaching and occupational therapy have become growth industries. To understand who we are and what our duty is, we Kali Yugans, disconnected from a Varnashram culture of self-realization, need help. The first help a spiritual culture provides is spiritually minded parents. I was really happy to find this on Google. Hare Krishna mom reading her daughter children's Krishna book. So this is in a spiritual society. The first guru we have is Guru Ma. We learn our mother tongue from our mother. And then if dad's a devotee, then that provides, complementary personalities. You're lucky to make it out of the womb in Kali Yuga. What to speak of having spiritual parents. And then you grow up more and more with only one parent, because the goal of the culture is not self-realization, it's sense gratification. And when the modes change, I'm monogamous. I have only one wife in my 20s, one husband in my 30s, one wife in my 40s. This is what's preached very often by so-called psychologists. It's really pretty crazy. So let's look at, what would you like to read?
To determine our prescribed duty, we need help.
Yeah, and right out of the womb we need help. Within the womb. Did I tell you the story of how George Harrison, his sister Louise, said George's pregnancy was very problematic? Very problematic. He was really giving his mother, who also was named Louise, a hard time. And the only thing that would calm George down, someone had given his mother, Louise, because the gifter knew that Louise was having a difficult pregnancy. This lady gave Louise one of those 78 RPMs, long playing records, of Indian ragas. So George woke up in the womb listening to Indian ragas. Purva vyasena tenaiva hriyate yadashopisa jikyasura piyogasya shabda brahmati vartate. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life. Okay, so it's not that George was born in a family of Mahatmas, like Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, but there was some previous impressions, right? And therefore, George was, as we say, dry grass. He was ready when he heard the sound of the sitar from Ravi. Ravi became his Varna guru. Okay, so let's move on. So let's look at, what do I say here? To determine our prescribed duty, we need help. This is a quote, famous quote, we know it well, we all know it, by Lord Rishabhdev, identifying the first helpers we need to progress spiritually. The first helpers, parents, on our journey to understanding our mission for Krishna. Okay. So here's a famous verse about Ranga.
One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipful demigod.
Lord Rishabhdev just lays down the law. Right there, Prabhupada would refer to this verse a lot, and here's how he referred it to the verse once upon a time in Melbourne, in April 76.
Did you turn it off? Did you turn it off?
No. Oh, you're right. So my thumb tends to...
Okay.
I have to remember this slides, it doesn't click. Okay, so Prabhupada comments in this case, quote, "This is real contraceptive method. If you think that if a child is born, I shall educate him in such a way that this birth will be his last birth. Next he is going home, back to Godhead. Then produce a child. Otherwise, don't produce. This is spiritual contraceptive." So I mean, it's gotten so topsy-turvy now, people forget what the very purpose of sex is. It's just come to be like a contact sport. You know, there's no, oh, you mean there might be a child? Well, we'll take care of that with technology, right? We got our pills, we got this device, that device. You got to reconnect people to the, there's a divine purpose to that very powerful energy. This is real father and mother. Otherwise, a dog is also becoming a father. But such kind of father becoming is not recommended in the Vedic civilization. Now, just become a real father to give the real benefit to the son. Then you become a father. So, underscoring the great responsibility of parents, Srila Prabhupada once wrote a devotee mother. This is a famous letter. I think that's where the phrase Vaikuntha children came into ISKCON lexicon, which Urmila later appropriated for the title of a book, Vaikuntha children, homeschooling your children. So, yeah. So this lady, I withhold her name, and you probably know anyway, when you start hearing the story. She was chastised by Prabhupada, although she took it well. But the story is often told wrong and misunderstood, so she kindly asks me to drop her name, because people get an attitude toward her by the story. So anyway, it was 1972, it was LA, and the lady was in LA with her son. And so, book distribution had just started, big, really, with the Christmas marathon in 72, right? So she wanted to catch the wave, right? Catch the wave of book distribution, please Prabhupada, like everybody else was doing. And she also was very attached to worshipping Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish. So she had a son, the son was about 1.5 years, 2 years. So she wrote Prabhupada and she asked Prabhupada if she said, actually she already had done it, she said, Srila Prabhupada, I want to distribute your books. I want to please you, like everyone else is doing here. And I want to increase my deity worship. So I've given my son every time during the day, for many hours actually, to a friend. So she just wanted to, she'd already done it, but she wanted to get some validation for that. So Prabhupada wrote back, for you, child worship is more important than deity worship. These children are given to us by Krishna. They are Vaishnavas, and we must be very careful to protect them. Prabhupada knew just by virtue of the birth. They had previous practice, and now they're continuing. These are not ordinary children, they are Vaikuntha children, and we are very fortunate we can give them a chance to advance further in Krishna consciousness. That is very great responsibility. Do not neglect it or be confused. Your duty is very clear. And then Prabhupada said something really heavy at the end, and he says, and if you can't do this, if you're not capable of being with your child all the time, he's only a little, baby practically, little boy, then you send him to me and I will take care of him. So he really underscored the point, right? Okay, so besides good parents, we also need good teachers and spiritual masters. Okay. Famous story, Dhruva Maharaj. So if you know the history from the 4th canto, Dhruva was just 5 years old. This is a previous yuga, so he's Kshatriya, and he has been insulted. He's only 5, but he's been insulted by his stepmother. Saruchi, right? You remember the history. Is it there? Oh, that's Narada. Right. Okay, so he's been insulted. Saruchi says, you cannot sit on the lap of the king, your father. She was the favorite queen. I'm the favorite queen. Your mother, Suniti, she's not. She's lesser, right? So unless and until you take birth from my womb, you cannot sit on the lap of the king. So Dhruva is just furious. He's only 5, but he's a thoroughbred, heavy-duty, pedigree Kshatriya. And so even at 5, he's like furious. And you see the picture. He's like, take a long walk off a short pier, right? Saruchi. And that's his mood. You can't tell me that. So he's only 5, so he's furious, but he's also crying, and he goes to his mother, and Suniti's a very humble lady, God-conscious lady, so she says, well, it's true, Dhruva, I'm not the favorite queen, and I can't, we would say, lobby for you, to the king, because the king is very attached to Saruchi. I think, only God can help you. And the sages say, the rishis say, that they see God in the forest. That's where they get God's darshan. So you may have to do that someday. Well, Dhruva just took up the order right then. So he left the palace and he went to the forest. And who should he meet? But our favorite yogi. He's always right on the spot. Narada Muni. And, let's see here. So Dhruva tells Narada his story, and yeah, so what we're going to have in this slide and the next slide, we're going to have how Narada tried to dissuade, he tried to persuade Dhruva not to be in the forest. He's only a 5-year-old boy. And the recommended process for God realization in that age was Ashtanga Yoga, mystic yoga. So he didn't think Dhruva was ready for that. Little did he know. So he said this. First Narada tried the first level of persuasion, which is reason and logic. And the second level is diplomacy, and then bribery, and then finally, boom, the stick. Prabhupada would say, argumentum ad baculum. So he's trying to preach to Dhruva. And so, that's it.
Narada to Dhruva. One should try to keep himself satisfied in any condition of life, whether distress or happiness, which is offered by the Supreme Will. A person who endures in this way is able to cross over the darkness of nescience very easily.
Mm-hmm. So that's how he's preaching. And that kind of preaching would probably work with a Brahminically qualified boy. And so Dhruva says this.
Dhruva, my dear Lord, I am very impudent for not accepting your instructions, but this is not my fault. It is due to my having been born in a Kshatriya family. Therefore, your valuable instruction does not stand in my heart.
Now, in the purport to this verse, 4836, you're going to hear Prabhupada talk about how there's people have different kinds of natures, but he doesn't use the word nature, he uses the word spirit. This is one of the only times I've ever seen Prabhupada use the word spirit to refer to a combination of the modes. And it underlines the importance of people being trained according to their nature or spirit, Prabhupada says. So let's, let me read that.
Dhruva Maharaj indirectly informed the great sage Narada that there are 4 kinds of human spirit: the Brahminical spirit, the Kshatriya spirit, the Vaishya spirit, and the Sudra spirit. The spirit of one caste is not applicable to the members of another. The philosophical spirit enunciated by Narada Muni might have been suitable for a Brahmana spirit, but it was not suitable for a Kshatriya. Dhruva frankly admitted that he was lacking in Brahminical humility and therefore unable to accept the philosophy of Narada Muni.
Mm-hmm. Let's hear Prabhupada say it. He said the same thing very powerfully in September 1976 in Vrindavan, talking about the importance of people being educated according to their spirit or their nature, which is what the Varnashram College is all about. Why isn't it playing? This is still the purport. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The statements of Dhruva Maharaj indicate that unless a child is trained according to his tendency, there is no possibility of his developing his particular spirit. It was the duty of the spiritual master or teacher to observe the psychological movement of a particular boy and thus train him in a particular occupational duty.
Mm-hmm. So here's Prabhupada saying the same thing in Vrindavan.
The spiritual master will say that you work like this. That is natural. That's why in the school, college, somebody is being trained up as a scientist, somebody is trained up as an engineer, as a medical man, as a lawyer. They are according to the tendency, practical psychology of the student. He is advised that you take this life. So, by the instruction of the Guru, the real purpose is Krishna consciousness. And according to his guna and karma, he is engaged in a particular occupational duty.
Once upon a time, a sannyasi wrote Prabhupada, and this sannyasi was collecting a lot of funds for Prabhupada's projects in India, and he was complaining about another sannyasi who wasn't giving anything to the BBT, whereas this sannyasi was giving, thousands of dollars. So Prabhupada wrote him back and he said, don't you think the spiritual master knows how to engage different kinds of disciples in different ways? It's not the duty of that person that the complainer was referring to send money, to my book fund, half of which went to construction. So, Prabhupada's saying the same thing here. Now, so the closer Srila Prabhupada, see that was 76 in Vrindavan, September 29. Not much more than a year before Prabhupada left our vision. The closer Srila Prabhupada came to the end of his life, the more he emphasized a varnashram approach to engaging everyone in devotional service. Whereas surrender to Krishna during ISKCON's early days often meant sacrificing, giving up one's natural propensities. We used to say, what do we always say? Just do the needful, Prabhu. Right? So that's still true, but the needful has evolved. To make his mission, okay, let me read that again. Whereas surrender to Krishna during ISKCON's early days often meant sacrificing one's natural propensities for the sake of quickly spreading the movement worldwide, to make his mission sustainable over time, Prabhupada now highlighted the great need for everyone to identify and engage their natural propensities in Krishna's service. Okay. Since spiritual masters play such crucial roles in helping us find our mission in Srila Prabhupada's mission, how did Srila Prabhupada advise us to select our spiritual masters? So it's a whole constellation of helpers, beginning with the parents, ideally, and then the teachers and the gurus. So the next slide, I was actually present for when Prabhupada said this. It was Miami, 1975, February. I don't remember him saying this, so I really thank Prabhupada again and again for insisting we record his talks. It's a little hard to hear because there's a plane flying overhead, but you can see the words too. And the picture doesn't go with it. The picture is Prabhupada's chanting japa in the Dwarka in his rooms. So let's hear Prabhupada on selecting our spiritual masters.
Therefore nobody should accept blindly any guru, and nobody should blindly accept any desire. They must behave one another at least for 1 year. This is the instruction by Sanatana Goswami in his Hari Bhakti Vilas.
What did Prabhupada mean when he said behave? He was searching for the right word. He didn't really say it, but you can sort of infer.
Maybe examine.
Yes, exactly. A mutual examination process, which doesn't go on much, but it should. And one reason is the way Prabhupada had to do things. In the beginning, he was always traveling, so he couldn't personally sit down in one place because he was exploding a whole movement. But he did depend on, I think we mentioned this, the temple presidents, to examine the prospective disciples, people who were coming. And Prabhupada made it very clear to the TPs. You see if they're following the principles, if they're cooperating. And then if they were, 6 months to a year, what did Prabhupada say here? 1 year. Yeah, that's actually what it says in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Then they would be recommended for initiation. And here's another quote from Hari Bhakti Vilas that Prabhupada refers to Hari Bhakti Vilas in a lecture in Honolulu, 1974. Quote, in Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sanatana Goswami, it is directed that the spiritual master and the disciple must meet together, at least for 1 year, so that the disciple may also understand that here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. And the guru also can see that here is a person who is fit for becoming my disciple. Then the business is nice. Just because you have it's like marriage. Prabhupada actually used this example in March 66 in the Bowery. The first full Gita lecture recorded. And Prabhupada made this analogy to marriage. I didn't put it on this one, it's in student notes. Just because you have a nice boy and a nice girl doesn't mean they can be married. There should be some compatibility. In the beginning of the movement, it wasn't like that. Do the needful. Okay, like the Prabhupada told me how he and Kamalini got married. Yeah, we were in New York Temple, it was 1973 or 5 or whatever it was. And they decided it was time to marry people. They, the authority. Okay, so you marry him. And you. They survived, but they're one of the few who did that kind of a thing. In the Bhagavatam, there's a whole art and science of matching people. There's anulom, pratilom. Anulom is auspicious. It's when a man who's of a little higher station than the lady marries this lady who's not quite as qualified. But it works because, that's one reason it can work, is because she can look up to him, right? There's a pati guru. He's more qualified, right? Pratilom is when the lady is naturally more qualified and it's harder, right? So we don't try to defy the laws of nature, we try to work with them. That's why right in the Gita Nagari scheme, Prabhupada in the forum, he talks about using Jyotish to marry people, because that's kind of a basic thing. Anyway, Krishna consciousness can overcome that. Pure, if you're really advanced, but we need all the help we can get. So we do take help of these little Vedangas, these limbs of the Vedas, these arts and sciences, to make a favorable wind, to help us along. So you noticed that it was a two-way street. It wasn't just that the disciple was checking out the guru, that the guru was checking out the disciple, right? Mutual examination process. Then the business is nice, Prabhupada said. Question: what challenges do we face to follow this practice? How can we overcome these challenges? You want to tackle that? What challenges do we face to... It's kind of obvious when you look... If the guru and the disciple perspective are to be closely associating for a year, so what challenges do we face?
Sometimes the guru that you feel is suitable for you lives on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, right. And there's too few people even accepting the service of initiation. So we need, as we said way back in Lesson 1, we need millions of gurus, Prabhupada said. We need millions of gurus. In other words, the guru-disciple culture should be very local to make it sustainable. And also the shiksha culture has to be built up more, because we learned in Lesson 1, shiksha and diksha are equal and identical manifestations of Krishna. It's not categorically higher or lower. Okay, so that's a big one. We should... So that I always, we talk about initiation a little bit in this lesson. So I think I mentioned this. We shouldn't avoid it, initiation, or we shouldn't just dive into it either. It should be done very thoughtfully, carefully, over time. So, okay, we'll look at that a little bit later. I think I'll tell I have a story about that. Okay, in addition to taking guidance from bona fide spiritual masters, what else must we do to find our mission in Srila Prabhupada's mission? So I took this from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as gleaned from Shivaram Swami. He's writing some Varnashram books. Has anybody read his Varnashram Compendium Volume 1? I think Volume 2 is out too, or it's coming out. It's really good. He's not only, carrying the baton, the Varnashram baton now in ISKCON, but he's writing books about it, which is really useful.
What sort of seminar he was giving back to the man?
Okay. So, that's a focus of his. So, let's look at that. It's a waterfall's journey. A waterfall's journey. As water seeks its own level, so we all seek our true, authentic self. And that means, in this life, who is our true, authentic self serving Krishna? We don't disregard the hand we've been dealt. We don't disregard our gross body, subtle mind. We all have earthly needs and psychological needs. In his Sri Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur concludes that before settling our occupational duty, we need to purify our nature. In his Varnashram Compendium, Volume 1, Chapter 30, quote, Determining One's Varna, His Holiness Srila Ram Swami points out that by seriously and sincerely following the devotional life Prabhupada has given us, we can purify our nature in 3 ways. So here's 3 ways of purification. Because just because we have tendencies toward action, toward work, doesn't mean we're actually fit to use them in devotional service unless those tendencies are trained and purified. So let's look at how about Manaji?
Me?
Yeah. I forgot your name.
Leelavata.
Leelavata.
Finding our mission requires purification by rites of passage.
By rites of passage. We would say samskars in Vedic culture. By rites of passage, qualifying oneself. For example, for first and second initiation, and firmly committing oneself either to the path of celibacy or to the path of responsible marriage. Okay, so yesterday I let drop the first Varna, then ashram, right? You have to know, you have to be a whole person, properly engaged. You can't just be some needy, confused, and that's how we are, needy and confused. But by education and training, well, that's coming up, or by purification of our nature, for example, by qualifying ourselves for first and second initiation. And then Bhaktivinoda says, when you do that, then you should know what if you're going to get married. Just like Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj in Mayapur, when he has his Bhaktivedanta Academy. So he trains, I asked him, when you train your young men, you know, they look very paka, right? And they're wearing all these Vedic things and turbans. And when you train them as good students, brahmachari students, do you also train them about the grihastha? What's that all about, the grihastha ashram? Because most people enter that next stage. Most people don't skip that grade in the school of life. They go through that. He said, oh yeah, big time. And then when he does that part of their training, all of them thank him. The ones who want to stay, you know, celibate and brahmachari and like that, say, thank you, Maharaj. I didn't really understand completely the responsibilities of grihastha life. I can see this is much simpler, and if I make my austerity, you know, controlling the senses and just being a humble servant of the Guru, then I can avoid that. And then the ones who actually show signs and most of them, of needing to go through that stage, they say also, oh, thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, I knew the Grihastha ashram was a life of responsibility, but you know, you spelled out those responsibilities in terms of supporting the family and being sensitive to the psychology of the life and the needs. So either way, he does that, which is very good. I thought that was very good. So that should be one way we get purified, and before we know our varna, or before we... by qualifying ourselves in terms of knowledge of the books, and knowing from that also whether we're going to get married or not. Okay, so the next way of purification is Lila Avatar.
By education and training.
Yes, immersing oneself in and allowing oneself to be transformed by systematic scriptural study. Oh, yeah, the first one I was just supposed to say first and second initiation. Here's where Bhakti Shastri comes in. And deeper than Bhakti Shastri, like I taught Bhakti Shastri and I taught Bhakti Vaibhav, and it's so quick. I mean, it's a sprint to the end of those courses. You don't really have time to go that deep at the Mayapur Institute, although Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj, his Bhagavatam study lasts 12 years. So you do go deeper there. Okay. By education and training. For example, a Bhakti Shastra degree. Also, readily agreeing to accepting counselor supervision. You know, the counselor system that was started in Chowpatty, and then Niranjan Swami especially does it in Ukraine. So, false ego naturally recoils from that. I don't need a counselor. I'm okay, you know. But that's part of the training. According to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you need a senior whom you can confide in along the way, or a group of seniors. And let's see here. Yeah. So far it's education and rites of passage, education and training, and Lila Avatar.
By devotional practices.
Yeah. So, for example, this Brahma Muhurta sadhana that Prabhupada's given us, as I mentioned before, it covers all the essential practices that Rupa Goswami mentions that you need to advance spiritually. You know, there's 64 devotional principles in Nectar Devotion. Does anybody remember not the first 5, but of all the 64, there's 5 just like essential nutrients you need when they give you the American Medical Association says what you need to eat to get all the nutrients you need. So there's 5 essential devotional practices that you need to do in order to be properly nourished along the bhakti path. Anybody know what they are? Well, more specifically, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting Hare Krishna, or sometimes it's listed as some kirtan,
Worshipping the deity.
Worshipping the deity. No, that's in another list.
Residing in a holy place.
Residing in a holy place. And if you have an apartment in town, you can make that a holy place with sacred images, sacred sounds.
Associating with devotees.
That's the big one. That's the most challenging. Because we'll take a look at that in the next lesson, of why it's challenging to serve with others if you don't already know intuitively. Yeah. So, Maharaj mentions this. Regularly participating in Srila Prabhupada's full morning program, either at the temple or in one's home. Prabhupada's early morning program for us includes the 5 most purifying practices outlined in NOD. Chanting Hare Krishna, worshipping the deities, associating with devotees, staying in a sacred place, and studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Once our nature has been sufficiently purified by those items, we are ready to settle our varna, our mission in Srila Prabhupada's mission. At the same time, there is one more aspect that Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions. This is where I say it takes a village. Finding our mission requires consultation. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is really into this consultation. Okay. All right. John.
We trusted seniors who know us well.
Yeah. Consultation with trusted seniors who know us well. So in the Sri Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also describes a collective process for determining one's varna, or calling, involving, of course this is, in more Vedic terms, but the principles are universal. Here the process of consulting involves family elders, the family priest or Acharya, and village leaders. These senior well-wishers focused on the person's nature, especially the qualities that dominated the individual's personality, because we are a mixed bag of tricks, mixed modes. But over time, the predominant mode will, the default mode, we could say, will manifest, as well as the person's attraction to a particular work. The main takeaway for us is that our varna should be ascertained in consultation with senior devotees who have known us for some time. At the age of 40, I went to Vrindavan for the first VIHE. It was in 1987. Borijan Prabhu was launching higher education, especially for adults, but yeah, especially for adults. And so I went to the first semester. I took courses like Clear Thinking and Strong Speaking by Jayadurga Swami, Vaishnava Etiquette, Bhakti True Maharaj. I forget the others. But so, when did I bring that up? Oh yeah. So another reason I went to Vrindavan at that time, besides taking these courses, I was really at kind of at a crossroads. I was living in Gitanagari with my wife, and I was writing the Plain Living High Thinking column in BTG, Simple Living High Thinking. And I was giving classes, but I thought I should focus more on one or the other. Should I teach or write? Yeah, that was my big to be or not to be question. Teach or write. So I would go in the mandir, Krishna Balaram Mandir, regularly, and I'd make this prayer. My dear Lord, Krishna Balaram, Sisi Gonitai, Sisi Radhesham, if you so desire, please reveal my life's mission. What which should I teach or write? And then when I'd come out of the mandir, and it was uncanny. Practically within 5 minutes of coming out of the mandir, someone would say to me, "Hey, Suresvara, when are you going to write another article for BTG? Hey, Suresvara, when are you going to give class?" So this went on consistently. So the message was, do both. They're complementary, teaching and writing. So that was very satisfying, and I felt very grateful to Prabhupada and Krishna. Okay, so let's see here. Scroll on the second item and ask a student to read. I'm giving you my stage directions. All right? This is pretty mystical. Lady in the back, what's your name?
Katya.
Oh, you're Katya. Like my eyes are going, huh?
Exactly, they're behind you.
Lady in the back. She's cooking. Cooking and living on her mercy. All right, Katya, read that.
With qualified seers of our past, present, and future.
What does that mean? This is about to know. Seers refers to qualified Vaishnava astrologers who can help guide us to the supreme destination. In his 1948 essay, quote, The Conception of the Gita Nagari Part 2, Prabhupada writes that children should be educated, quote, by a test of practical psychology and by examination of the birth horoscope of the child. And in his purport to Bhagavatam 10.8.5, Prabhupada wrote this purport, Srila Prabhupada comments, quote, It is the duty of a father to understand the astrological position of his children and do what is needed for their happiness. So then I end that by saying, if qualified Vaishnava astrologers confirm in our stars what our seniors observe about us on the ground, that will help us confidently settle our varna, our mission in his mission. Some people just know right from the get-go. You hear people say, I knew I was going to be a chef when I was 4 years old, right? I was always cooking with my mother or father or whatever. But most of us, it's not like that, especially in Western society where the goal of life is sense gratification. Because even if you know your calling in life, there's going to be times when you don't want to do it. Like Arjuna, one of the most qualified Kshatriyas on the planet, he didn't want to fight. So Krishna said, no, this is who you are, and if you don't fight, you're going to have infamy, dishonor is worse than death. And then the 18th chapter he said, if you don't fight out of false ego, you're going to fight anyway. You're going to act anyway, but you're going to act for the wrong cause. So it's very important that we find our mission in the mission, understand our duty. And then third thing under consultation is, it's the same, yeah. Who was reading?
Katya.
Yeah.
With teachers and advisors in our national college.
Yeah, which we don't have yet. We're still in the pre-Varnashram ISKCON, so it's tough. But that's the job, to really help them identify, what the dominant default modes are and how you can engage those modes, like Krishna said in the Gita, by following one's qualities of work. Every person can become perfect. You don't have to be somebody else. And just be yourself, but be yourself for Krishna. By worship of the Lord. That was the next verse. You can attain perfection. And then in that purport, Prabhupada talks, in the next purport, about how in every calling there's some sort of fault, right? Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosha api natyajait. In every varna, you're going to find something that's, there's something nasty about it, or undesirable. But you got a duty, so you got to do it. So, for this one, Srila Prabhupada assigned a crucial role to the Varnashram College for the, quote, re-spiritualization of human society, starting with ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada issued a long-standing order on this point during a morning walk in Vrindavan on March 12, 1974. You all know it by heart now. Quote, everywhere, wherever we have got our center, our Varnashram College should be established to train 4 divisions. I'm going a little more than what I put on the screen. 1 class Brahmin, 1 class Kshatriya, 1 class Vaishya, 1 class Shudra, but everyone will be elevated to the spiritual platform by the spiritual activities we have prescribed. And all those natural varnas, they learn how to serve each other, cooperate, they appreciate each other, they don't compete. Above all, we must remember that Srila Prabhupada, as our founder Acharya, remains our foundational inspiration and guide for finding our mission in his mission. So here's the famous quote that really balances the whole Varnashram lesson. Okay, it's in the first canto actually, it's in the purport to a verse in the first canto. So let's have Yogendra Prabhu read this famous purport.
It does not matter what one is, one must dedicate everything to the service of the Lord. If one is a learned scholar, scientist, philosopher, poet, etc., then he should employ his learning to establish the supremacy of the Lord. Similarly, if one is a businessman, an industrialist, an agriculturalist, etc., then one should spend his hard-earned money for the cause of the Lord. One should try to engage in the service of the Lord everything.
Everything.
For which one has specific attraction. And that is the way of peace and prosperity. And that is the remedial measure for all the miseries of material existence.
Now, Gita 2:47. Karman nivarikaraste. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. In the purport to that verse, Prabhupada identifies 3 kinds of duties. He talks about desired work, that means stuff we like to do naturally just by our birth. Routine work, like we all have to brush our teeth, rake the leaves, the stuff we just got to do to maintain the body. And emergency work. There's stuff that, like if there was a fire right now in this building, we'd all cooperate very nicely. We wouldn't say, oh, that's not my varna. I can't put out the fire. This happened in LA in '76. There was a gas main blew on Venice, right down the street from the temple. And so the Public Works Department thought that other mains were going to blow right in the area. So we all 400 of us had to evacuate the deities, meaning Dwarkadish and the rest, up the street. And at the BBT, we had carried all these vital documents and equipment up the street, away from the vulnerable area. You've never seen 400 people in New Dwarka cooperate like we did. I mean, we were just running. You didn't have to say anything. You just had to, you lend a hand, and everybody knew the next step to do just because of the urgency. So again, that was the kind of mode Prabhupada was in Of course, Prabhupada never lost the urgency of Krishna consciousness, but he had us all in emergency mode when he started the movement, and we had to therefore forego our propensities and our default modes and just do the needful Prabhu. But again, as Prabhupada saw what his disciples, as Prabhupada saw us, observed us, and as people were having a hard time maintaining their Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada really was in this varnashram mood to make it sustainable, to have people trained according to their nature. Otherwise, in the short term, anybody can do emergency, but in the long term, it's got to be sustainable. You've got to have this varnashram mood. Okay, so that's the last slide. So then I say, as we pledge our shared allegiance to and draw our deepest inspiration from our founder Acharya, all of us will receive the help we need to find our natural place serving Srila Prabhupada's mission, and following his example, come to execute that mission solely for the pleasure of the Lord. So there's something behind that. I had a little agenda in saying that. Because, say I was a brand new guy, instead of being 72, I was 27. Reverse the numbers, right? I walked in the temple, say here in the Talavana, and if I were lucky, then the senior devotees would insist that I get grounded in the founder Acharya. Get my foundation there. They wouldn't immediately start pointing me to a spiritual master or spiritual masters, but they wanted to ground me in Prabhupada's life, teachings, mood, and mission. And then over time, maybe some years, then I would get to know who I am in devotional service, and then start aspiring. I told the story about Dubai, right? Dubai and did I tell you the story about teaching the Bhakti Vriksha leaders?
I remember it, but I don't remember it.
Didn't I tell that story?
Yeah, you told that story.
I did. Yeah. But the punchline was, I asked them, how you train people in Dubai, the Indians that come to work there. And, Prabhu, first we have the aspiring stage. Remember? And so I said, really? First to teach them how to aspire for a spiritual man? I didn't even know the people, right? So by the end of the seminar I said, yeah, you can do that, teach them how to aspire, but then if you don't have how about a foundational stage? If you don't ground them in Prabhupada's life teachings, mood, and mission, they will aspire, then they will perspire, then they will expire. Because they don't have a strong foundation. When the going gets tough, life is tough. If you're not really grounded, then you're going to just go away. If you don't have a strong, relationship with Srila Prabhupada. And have a close relationship with your Diksha Guru, Shiksha Gurus who help you weather those storms. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Right? So, we get to know ourselves, and then based on how our local people who know us observe about us or engaging us, then they might suggest that we take the next step and get initiated, right? Rupa Goswami's, Pado Shraddha Tatak Sadhu, the Bhajana Kriya, step 3 in the 9-step recovery process. AA has 12 steps, we have 9 steps. So Bhajana Kriya means you really commit to practicing serious sadhana, and you're convinced this is my life's work. Right? Going back to that, that's my life's mission. So then, it's actually in one sense easier today because everybody who has that service, pretty much, or anybody met them, they have websites. You can get to know people just a little bit anyway. Say for example, that I'm convinced that my calling, after reading Prabhupada's books and serving the devotees, is to really protect the cows and work the bulls. Cow protection. So then I might start thinking, I'd like to be initiated by someone who has that mission in Prabhupada's mission, like Bhakti Raghava Swami, right? Or somebody else who's doing that. So then I would maybe write him, email him. I'm here to Talavana, I heard about you, and I like that, and I think you could help me. So that's a more kind of fine-tuned approach to initiation, perhaps. Very often we want to be initiated for the wrong reasons. This is a famous person, I want to be a disciple of a famous person. And because he's famous, you may never see him. Right? Anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you my story. Another lady who would like to be anonymous. I think I'll do this sitting down. Her story, you may or may not know her, but she also asked me she didn't want to be the poster child for waiting a long time for initiation, so she just asked me to keep her name anonymous. And she actually saw me teaching this lesson in Soho Street in London.
Is the mic on?
Yeah, I do, but I'm not talking into the mic. Thank you. And she saw me tell the story online, live. And she said, "You did it. You kept your word. Thank you very much." So I said, "Well, yeah, I want to be your friend." And so here's the story. This lady is from India, and she was already a teacher before she joined the movement. Very bright person. And then one fine day, she was teaching in Hong Kong, I think, at the time. Anyway, she read Prabhupada's Gita as it is. And she was thrilled. Wow, this is the absolute truth. This is what I was always looking for. But then she was mortified to find out, when she went to Calcutta, I think, that the author had left this planet 10 years before. She read the Gita in 87, so Prabhupada left in 77. But still she was so inspired that she wanted to serve his mission, right? And study his books. And then 3 years later, she met a person initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And they developed a relationship, and lo and behold, they got married. And then she moved to America, because he was in America. And then she's reading Prabhupada's books, now 3 years, maybe 91, 4 years. And it says in Prabhupada's books that you must take initiation, because that's what Srila Rupa Goswami says in Nectar of Devotion. Right? It's a natural progression. But think of the time, the 90s. She read the Gita in the late 80s. ISKCON's having a real hard time. Right? The Zonal Acharya era had happened, a lot of betrayals, a lot of fall downs, creepers trampled by imitation of Prabhupada's position, and she starts getting a little jittery about the organization, right? The external ISKCON. During that, I was living in Gitanagari in the 80s, and I always would say, "Don't worry, Prabhu's ISKCON's alive and well inside your beanbag." And inside Prabhupada's books, don't worry, we'll just weather the storm here. So anyway, she's reading Prabhupada's books, and Prabhupada says, "Look, you got to be initiated." So she writes somebody who is initiating, has been initiating, because she's inspired by the person, what the person's written and what the person has spoken. And then the person writes back and said, "Well, I'm not initiating so much anymore, and you may never see me, and you're married to a good disciple of Srila Prabhupada, a direct disciple. Why don't you just take instructions from your husband?" And of course, Prabhupada, interestingly, unlike Vedic culture, he didn't just say, "Follow your husband." He separately initiated men and women, perhaps knowing, that we need all the help we can get, and what if something happens to the husband, or etc. Mm-hmm. So she's disappointed, but she thinks, "Oh, okay, I really admire Maharaj, and I better just do what he says," and like that. So she did. Now this woman's very qualified. It's a little bit pratilom. She has a hard time looking up to her husband, although he's a good devotee, but she's more brainy, and he's more Vaishya oriented. Okay, so the 90s go on, ISKCON's still going through its somersaults, right? The 90s, we're not through with our fall downs yet, folks, and betrayals and all that stuff. So she starts getting more jittery, and she starts thinking, wow, I don't know if I can do this. Prabhupada's telling me I got to take initiation. There's even one statement in OD where Prabhupada says, quoting Rupa Goswami, unless one formally takes initiation, the actual connection with Krishna consciousness is never achieved. That's just, goes that far to say that. So she's really getting torn because she knows that she wants to make progress. But she's thinking now, I'll be darned if I'm going to offer incense to somebody else's picture, offer food to somebody else's, I don't want anybody coming in between me and Prabhupada. Maybe I'll be betrayed too, like so many people. So the 90s go on, and then the 90s start ending. You remember Y2K? Remember that? The whole world's going to go up in a puff of cyber smoke, right? Well, it didn't happen. So after that passes, she starts thinking, okay, this is driving me crazy. I have to take initiation. Although I'm really leery of doing that. Because she knows Prabhupada's her foundational spiritual master, although she has no vocabulary for that yet, because we're still recovering, and even then more, from the idea that the main person is your Diksha Guru. He's essential, like a parent, but he's not more important than the founder Acharya. Your uncles and your aunties and your parents are essential, but they're not. The foundational spiritual master of any line is the Dhama Acharya. So she tells her husband, Prabhu, I've got to resolve this. This is driving me crazy. So then in 2003, they're at a festival. And a certain Maharaj is speaking. And she finds him very inspiring. So she wasn't thinking initiation then, but she was thinking that here's a person I can trust. So she says to her husband, Prabhu, I've got to meet with Maharaj. I've got to tell him my dilemma. I need some more guidance on what to do about this. So her husband said, okay, I'll approach the manager of the festival. So the manager says, well, Maharaj, he's been traveling thousands of miles all over the world, and he's not feeling well, he's exhausted. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10 minutes, right, to tell you your life story and what to do, about Diksha and all this. So it happened. They had a meeting, the husband and the wife and the Maharaj. Now, by Krishna's grace, 10 minutes turned into 20 minutes, 20 minutes turned into 30 minutes, 30 minutes turned into 40 minutes, and by the end of 40 minutes, the lady had told her story. And she told, how torn she is. On the one hand, she knows that she has to, that's 17 years now, or 16 years, 87 to 03, that she knows she needs to be initiated to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, but she'll be darned if she's going to let anybody come in between her and Prabhupada, because she knows Prabhupada is her, that's where she's drawing her identity. And, so, what does the Maharaj say? Well, first she says, to end it, she says, is my attitude offensive? And so the Maharaj says, no, your attitude is not offensive, it's intelligent. Because of what she has experienced, and what the Maharaj has also experienced in the years since Prabhupada left us. It's become very problematic, the guru-disciple culture. So it's intelligent. And then she was encouraged by that initial response. And then the Maharaj did something very nice. He told her his story of how long it took him to accept Srila Prabhupada, what to speak of others. And then, so he told her his story. It was a long story. It was a rather long story. And then he said something that really made the light go on in her heart and mind. He said, "Now," and he didn't mean anything funny by it, but he just said matter-of-factly, "What if you took initiation someday from someone who would not block your relationship with Srila Prabhupada, who would not obscure it, make Prabhupada, second fiddle to the person you take initiation from? What if that person enriched, enhanced, and deepened your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? What about that?" Now the lady had never even heard that before. But that's the job description of the Diksha and Shiksha Gurus, that's their business. To bring you closer to our founder Acharya, our foundational spiritual master. So she just said to Maharaj, "Oh, I never heard that before." So what happened? So then she was so inspired by that breakthrough that she started corresponding with Maharaj, and they got to know each other, mutual examination for the next year, and then she eventually took Diksha from that person. See how I'm being very careful to keep it anonymous. And then, when I was inspired to make this seminar series in 2011, I told you that story. I knew her story because she's a friend, she's a colleague, she's a teacher. So I wrote her, I emailed her, I said, "So-and-so, Mataji, I know your story. I think it would really be good for the seminar series, for the Founder Acharya series. Could you write it down? I'm going to make sure I got all the details right. And just email me." She said, "Okay, but you have to swear on a stack of Bhagavad Gitas you won't reveal my name." No problem. So she told me the story in the email, and then in the epilogue, in the PS to the story, she said this. She said, it's lucky this is 2011, so she said, "It's been 7 years now since I've taken initiation from Maharaj, and I'm happy to say that not only has Maharaj kept his promise to enrich, enhance, and deepen my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, but now, because he is who he is, he has also taken his place in my heart at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada." So I said, "Yes, that's parampara. That's the way it works. If your gurus are doing, you're so grateful that they're also in the core of your heart. Not to replace Srila Prabhupada, but to, again, enrich, enhance, and deepen your relationship with him." So, when I tell that story, people, especially people who have yet to be initiated, they're inspired by that, because there's no rush to the judgment on who to take initiation from, and there's no avoiding it. It's inevitable, but it should be done in the right way. That's all. So, did you like that story?
Loved it.
That's the way it's supposed to work. So then here's my kind of funny PS. So if I were a new guy coming in today, 27 instead of 72, I might, because I like to walk, as Maharani knows. Where's Maharani? Oh, she already went.
She likes to work.
She likes to work. That's good. You join the right movement. And I like drama.
Join the right movement.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean that. But who's also visited here, right? And who likes drama and who likes to walk? Yeah, who initiates, right? So I might write him. I told him this. I told him that, you know, if I were a new guy coming in, Maharaj, I'd probably write you a letter. And he said, no, Suresh, come on. I'm a kangaroo, I'm not a guru. So, yeah. Okay, so that is pretty much, where are we anyway? Alright. Okay, so tomorrow morning is the lesson of all lessons. This is the most challenging lesson. Yeah. To love is to cooperate. So now we get into why it's such a challenge to cooperate.
Tomorrow is evening, right?
Oh, that's right.
Oh.
No, wait a minute. Today is Thursday. Yeah, so we get a long break.
Oh.
Wait, tomorrow we're doing it in the evening instead?
Yeah, Fridays. The first Friday and then this Friday we're doing it. Because some people might come if they work and then they want to come to the evening. That's the idea. I don't know if that's true here, but... Nobody works? I told Jesse, you're living in a retirement community. We need some young blood, so bring them in. Okay, so by the end of this last lesson that we did, finding our mission in the mission, students will be able to explain the importance of knowing and doing one's own duty, as well as why that can be difficult. Identify guides who can help us find our mission in life. Identify the responsibilities of prospective guru and prospective disciple. Explain how finding our mission requires purification and consultation. And finally, identify Srila Prabhupada as our foundational guide for finding our mission in his mission. Transition. As we find and develop our mission to help our founder Acharya re-spiritualize human society, we'll be in a better position to develop real love for him. In the next lesson, we'll look at why that intimacy with Srila Prabhupada we hanker for can be so elusive. That intimacy with Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. Can be so elusive. Okay. Gokul Ranjana Das.
So, along the story, just so there's we've heard all along that if we become successful in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we have the ability to liberate 7 past and future generations. So, in that regard, a husband and wife, if say the husband or the wife is initiated, but one isn't, then they also can be, and how does that relate to the quote that you gave by Prabhupada saying that you have to be initiated?
Yeah. Intelligence means, Prabhupada will tell us, to be able to balance 2 apparently contradictory statements. You find it all the time, right, in Prabhupada's Vani. Well, Prabhupada said this, but Prabhupada said that. That's why, Veda-based lawyers who want to advocate their opinion, they just pull stuff to push their own agenda.
Well, I'm not trying to push it.
No, I know that. So you're asking how can we reconcile? That's intelligence. And you're going to see, we're going to do that in the next lesson. This is uncanny how in the Q&A everybody anticipates the next lesson. It's great. You guys are really tuned in. So you want to sum it up again a little more?
But if the husband or the wife is initiated and the other isn't, and the initiated one is successful in their practice, they can liberate 7 generations of past and future, of people they didn't, or souls that they don't remember. If they knew them, they don't remember them. So they have that ability. And that has always been a selling card for being practicing Krishna consciousness. Don't worry about your parents. They don't like you now, but they'll like you later.
Or as Mark Twain said, when I was 14, I hated my old man. And then when I was 19, I was amazed at how much he learned. So yeah, we do progress. Well, initiation. Prabhupada would talk about sadhan siddha, nitya siddha, sadhan siddha, and kripa siddha.
Right.
So, as Mukunda Maharaj reported when George passed, because he was there, he and Shyam Sundar Prabhu, they were the only two devotees that were invited by Olivia to witness the passing. It was Derek Taylor, the Beatles' old road manager, and Ravi, and there was somebody else. Anyway, so everybody reports, if you've heard Olivia describe the disappearance, that when George left, the whole room lit up. He lit up. He was like, and Mukunda Maharaj said, I've never seen someone so at peace with himself. And Prabhupada used to refer to George sometimes as my uninitiated disciple. George died of lung cancer, his body. He was addicted to nicotine. That's what it does to you. Finally, he gave it up in the last years when they started, doing medical procedures on him. George was so, he did more for the Hare Krishna movement probably than I'll ever do in lifetimes. So that to me is an example of kripa siddha. It's not the standard way, as Prabhupada would say. The normal way to get a degree from a university is you matriculate, you enter, you go through the courses, and you get a diploma. Once in a while, like, was it last year, or a couple of years ago, Bob Dylan got a doctorate? No, he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. Right? And he was surprised, because he was a singer. He didn't consider, he said, I never thought of my songs as literature. But he was literary. He was literate and literary. His very stage name, Dylan, was taken from Dylan Thomas. Right? So, we don't sit around waiting for honorary degrees. We do go through the process, and that's the normal way, but it can happen. So, in terms of husband and wife and initiation, I saw a nice letter to Shalabhati, who was the first person to learn deity worship even before Jamuna. Prabhupada instructed her after we installed Radhamandanishwar from December 14th, 1969 to December 20th. When he left, he told Jamuna all he could in 6 days. And so she became an expert, an exemplar in deity worship. But Shalabhati was the first one in LA. That summer, earlier that summer, Prabhupada gave her so many instructions on deity worship. But she was having a hard time personally with her husband, who was not initiated. And she was less advanced, actually. He was trying, he was game, but he didn't make it. And then Shalabhati wrote a letter to Prabhupada. I didn't see the letter, but you can tell from the reply that Prabhupada is talking about. He said the system is the husband is the spiritual master for the wife, but if the wife is more advanced, there's no harm in the wife being the spiritual master of the husband. Actually, Prabhupada said in this letter, it doesn't matter who surrenders to who. Because the one more closer to Krishna naturally can instruct the other one. So that's just a kind of a gender thing, a husband and wife thing. But it's really up to Krishna. It's ultimately everything's up to Krishna, how these things play out. Just like there's one letter, not just one letter, there's a few letters where devotees ask Prabhupada, I understand, Prabhupada, that the spiritual master takes the karma of the disciple, and then if the disciple doesn't make it all the way back, that the spiritual master has to come back. Is that true? So several people wrote this kind of letter, and Prabhupada would answer them differently according to where they were at, what their motive was in asking that. So one answer Prabhupada gave to that letter is it true the spiritual master comes back? Prabhupada said, yes, that's true, so don't make me come back. To another person he said, regarding that question, many questions, I'm still thinking on it. Don't bet on it. Because if we can break the contract, the spiritual master is not obliged if we break the contract by refusing to keep our vows and refusing to cooperate with what he wants us to do. So there's no black and white answer to that question.
I was on a morning walk where he was asked that question.
There you go.
And I was standing right in front of him when he answered it. And we were walking, and said, so is it true you'll come back? And Prabhu goes, yes. And then he stopped, and it had the cane. You know, he used the cane on that particular walk specifically, like a lot like a professor. And in this case, he put it down very strongly, his head back. But do not take advantage.
There you go. Right.
But along the lines with, can I just ask?
Let me just give one more way he would answer that question. The another way was, it's like a doctor and a patient. The doctor gives his diagnosis, gives his prescription, but if you don't follow his prescription, what can the doctor do? So similarly, the spiritual master is like the transcendental physician, and yes, he's willing to take you home, but you have to follow his advice, his prescription.
So, with the George Harrison example, you know, I met, there was a period after his passing, and then, you know, some other rather, you know, exceptional devotees, but they had exceptional fall downs, and their passing. And so the question I was discussing with some of my god brothers at the time, god sisters at the time, that, you know, who's in a better situation here? Because George didn't break any vows, the other one did. And the Kripa Siddha thing, you know, comes into play. So you wonder, but then it doesn't seem right, because he's riding his past karma, you know. So you know, the vow issue is a major component, I feel, to the Kripa Siddha.
The vow.
Yeah, if you make the vow, and then you break the vow.
It's really all about what's in the heart. You know, Krishna is looking at motive. Again, that same verse, 18, 17. One who is not motivated by false ego. Going back to Godhead, it's an art and it's a science, but it's not formulaic. It's not dependent, ultimately. It's dependent on Krishna being pleased with the heart of the person. And it's not just about, you know, I have Prabhupada in my heart, I don't need to be initiation. That's the wrong attitude of the heart. But the real attitude, you know, George, as we know, he wanted to just give up rock and roll and records. But Prabhupada said, no, you're bringing so many to Krishna. And eventually, you know, during the Dark Horse tour, that tour was panned, and he was panned for trying to preach on stage. So that's when he became a closet Krishna after that. After the initial splash, you know, 69, 70, and living in the material world, and all things must pass. Then he really wanted to be a preacher. It didn't work. So then he had two lives. He had his rock and roll friends, the traveling Woolberries later, and he had his Krishna friends. So that's what. But then when the notice was on the wall from 95 on, when his health started to go, you see some of those recordings. He was preaching straight.
Yeah.
Straight stuff. It was really like when he got stabbed in 99.
Krishna.
You know, and Olivia hit the guy over the head with a lamp, and otherwise the guy would have finished him off. But when he was stabbed, that stab wound came within a millimeter or something of hitting a major artery that would have finished him off. So when finally he recovered and he was ready to face the press about it. Hey George, what did you think? You know, what was going through your mind? They wanted the gory details, you know, but George just gave a very philosophical answer based on a song we sing. Bhaja Hurevana. He said, you know, well, life is as precarious as a raindrop on a lily leaf, you know. Kamala Jala Dala Jivana Talamala. Govinda Das says, you know, this life is just like water on a lily, on a lotus. We say lily in the West. So he was preaching straight, because he had his notice, and he was done with,
One young girl who worked at the archives, her father was working with us with our painting business, the Sterling one, the other side of Touchstone. And the young girl said that one day she didn't know who George Harrison was, and well, this is Dr. George. I had to order Srila Prabhupada's books. She had no idea who he was or anything. And then she found, got the address, and then suddenly goes, George Harrison? He ordered all the Prabhupada's books, and this was within the last few years.
Oh, before he passed.
Well, yeah, it was like probably around 2000 or 2000, like that, 1999, 98. He knew he'd already had some surgeries.
Yeah. One more George story, then we'll end it.
Katia been having a hand
Oh,
up a
I'm
long
sorry.
time.
Oh, okay, Katya. Katia or Katya? Or
I
what is
say
it?
Katia. I can't say Katia.
Okay, you are saying that first we have to purify our nature and to get to know ourselves, right?
That's
and
what
then,
you're doing.
Yeah, and then you'll find your place in Varna, Ashramas and so on.
Well, then, that purification, there's two things Bhaktivedanta mentioned in Sri Krishna Samhita. Purification and consultation. So what was the, I forget myself, who were the seniors? Yeah, like in the village in India, you had you had your parents, of course, but that's not applicable in this case. So you have senior devotees here. And Jyotish was a good tool. The trick is to find a bona fide astrologer, right? Like Ayurveda is bona fide.
So you have to be careful about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so don't lean on that so heavy in our context. And the other was the Varnashram College, which we don't have. So it's mainly about the senior devotees who really have your best interests at heart, who aren't pushing you towards some master or whatever, but they really want you to get grounded in Srila Prabhupada as the foundation. So what's your question?
My question is, this is ideal situation, but in reality, like for example, in real life, people they get married before they even know about something, or like so the process of purification and knowing what is your duty is coming after some, like when you already are playing role in society and have maybe duty which you don't want to fulfill. So how is it, how to combine these two things?
Yeah, well, everything's upside down and backwards in Kali Yuga. Like John's quote about who takes birth. Bull out of the bottle of beer, So, we all come damaged goods. We're all damaged goods, practically, unless you're pretty high birth. That's pretty rare. I mean, most of us came, after the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing had gone down. But that's how potent Prabhupada is, and people who follow him are, that they can take those damaged goods and really purify and rectify our thinking and our feeling and our willing, if we're willing. The more we take to it, the better. Just like when I first read Prabhupada's Gita, I was up in Canada fighting the Vietnam War in Canada. There were 10,000 of us up there, right, protesting. So then I went to the temple, because my roommate was from Minnesota, and he said, I know what we can eat today. We can go to the Krishna temple. They have a Sunday feast. I didn't know what that was. Anyway, I went, and I was already a seeker. So when I read Prabhupada's Gita, wow, this is it. I felt like I had a psychological chiropractic adjustment. A good chiropractor will release you, and the block goes away. So I felt like I was being strangled by the contradictions of life. Everything was a contradiction for me, because it's dualities, right? That's all it is, the material world. And I literally felt I was developing psychosomatic symptoms of strangulation. And as soon as I read that purple Gita with a black Vishnu silhouette, totally butchered by Macmillan, but enough of Prabhupada's potency came through that when I came to that 9th chapter, Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, and how the source and the emanation are inconceivably and simultaneously one and different, then everything made sense. Wow. I felt like I took a breath, I could breathe. And immediately that whole symptom went away. So we're, the world's crazy. It's a crazy place and it's getting crazy. So, but Krishna consciousness can overcome all of that. Even a late beginner, right? Prabhupada writes in the beginning, we're all like that because we haven't necessarily had Vaishnava parents or spiritual education. Everything is upside down and backwards, the values and the goals. So don't worry about that. Really don't worry. We all like that. But Krishna consciousness is really powerful. The more we take to it. Chanting Hare Krishna, really powerful. Chanting more now, but enjoying it less. Try listening, try hearing. Used to be a cigarette, Winston.
Yeah.
Smoking more now, enjoying it less. Have a Winston. No, have a Camel. So sometimes we get bored. Sometimes it becomes dry. That's because our consciousness has drifted from the basics, from the arts and the science of bhakti. So, from what I've observed, you're doing pretty good. Just keep going.
The other point was that when Srila Prabhupada would constantly be thanking us, his disciples, and never taking credit, but giving all credit to his spiritual master. He said that my spiritual master has sent you all to help me.
Yes, you're like my parents.
Yeah.
You take better care of me than my own parents, which was saying something. Yeah.
So a real disciple, real guru is a bona fide disciple.
Yes, you're going to see that dramatically at the end of lesson 9. And you hear a quote from Prabhupada that is completely incredible about how he thinks of himself. Okay, it's getting late, so we're going to convene tomorrow night, right? It's Friday night? 6:30?
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
Really? You said you wanted to go in the morning.
No, but I thought, you could have, was it true that people are more likely to come on Friday night if they don't come other times? Or not?
Well, I just don't know. I guess there's the possibility of someone coming tomorrow night. I don't know who.
Morning? Can we take a survey?
Oh yeah, we can do morning if you want. Although you've advertised, right, every night? Or no?
Not yet.
But I haven't heavily advertised. I just put it out there.
I'd rather do the morning. I'm fresher.
Morning.
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 All right.
Morning.
Nobody will get faked out and come in the evening.
Anybody freaked out about?
I don't know. Just send them over to your place for Goshen.
No, I'm not a marathon.
Mother Harikwan will put a mass text out to everybody.
Okay.
So
You'll do that?
it's in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's all right with you.
I was just thinking about watching my grandkids so my kids could come, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to be the dissenter.
Well, you are the dissenter, but you're outnumbered.
Yeah, okay, so.
Okay, great. Tomorrow morning, same time, 7:30 tonight. Srila Prabhupada.
Bye.